Okay, let's jump right into this explainer and look at the totally fascinating and sometimes completely baffling mechanics of our own minds. We're drawing directly from Daniel Kahneman's groundbreaking work, Thinking Fast and Slow. If you've ever wondered why you, or, the people around you, act the way they do, this framework is going to be absolutely eye-opening. We are about to explore the hidden machinery of cognition that literally dictates our daily lives.
So why on earth do we make terrible decisions, and worse, make them with absolute, unshakable confidence? Well, Kahneman actually had a pretty funny, specific ultimate goal for his work. He wanted to make us better at water cooler gossip. Seriously. He realized that it is just so much easier and, frankly, a lot more fun to point out the mistakes of others than to recognize our own. By giving us the tools to intelligently diagnose the bad decisions our colleagues and friends are making at the water cooler, he figured we might eventually turn that critical lens inward and, improve our own choices.
To be a good diagnostician of human behavior, kind of like a doctor figuring out a symptom, we need a richer vocabulary. And that starts with understanding that our brains constantly rely on unconscious shortcuts. When those shortcuts fail, they create a bias, which is basically a systematic error in thinking that pops up predictably in specific situations. Take the halo effect, for example. When a handsome, super confident speaker bounds onto a stage, we instinctively judge his actual comments way more favorably than he probably deserves. Having a label for that bias makes it so much easier to spot out in the wild.
Part 1. The origins of bias.
To really wrap our heads around where these biases come from, we've got to rewind to how this whole field of study began. This entire perspective traces back to a legendary collaboration that kicked off in 1969 at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Daniel Kahneman partnered up with a colleague named Amos Tversky. Now, Tversky was brilliant, incredibly logical, and really charismatic. They formed this perfect intellectual partnership. They spent the next 14 years practically inseparable, just constantly inventing questions and testing their own intuitive, off-the-cuff answers to complex problems. They realized pretty quickly that if an intuitive answer tempted them, it was probably going to tempt everyone else too. One of the very first questions they tackled was pretty straightforward. Are people good intuitive statisticians? I mean, we're amazing intuitive grammarians. A 4-year-old effortlessly follows complex grammar rules without having any clue they even exist, right? So they wanted to know if humans have that same innate feel for the basic principles of statistics. The answer, they quickly discovered, was a massive, resounding no. Even expert researchers and professional statisticians made wild, embarrassing errors when guessing probabilities. Our brains simply aren't wired to feel statistics intuitively.
Moving on to Part 2, the trap of resemblance. Let's put your brain to the test and see how you handle an everyday judgment. Think about a guy named Steve. Steve is very shy and withdrawn, invariably helpful but with little interest in people or the real world. A meek and tidy soul, he has a deep need for order and structure and a total passion for detail. Now assume that Steve was selected completely at random from a representative sample of the population.
Based entirely on that quick description, I want you to make a gut reaction guess right now. Is Steve more likely to be a librarian or a farmer? Lock in your answer.
Okay, if you guessed librarian, well, you're in the vast majority. The fact that Steve's personality so perfectly resembles the cultural stereotype of a librarian strikes almost everyone immediately. But here's the catch. By doing that, your mind used a heuristic. A heuristic is basically a simplifying rule of thumb your brain uses to make a really difficult judgment easy. You relied purely on how much Steve resembled that stereotype, and you completely and totally ignored the statistical reality of the actual world.
And this brilliantly illustrates the trap. In the United States, there are a staggering 20 male farmers for every single male librarian. Just think about that. Because the base pool of farmers is so incredibly massive compared to that tiny pool of librarians, it is almost a mathematical certainty that there are way more meek and tidy souls out there driving tractors than there are sitting behind library information desks. But our brains, they don't care about the math. They care about the story. We fall for the trap of resemblance, hook, line, and sinker.
Part 3. The Science of Availability. Okay, that was one mental shortcut, but there's another really huge blind spot in our mental machinery. Ready for another quick test? Think about the letter K in the English language. Is the letter K more likely to appear as the first letter in a word or as the third letter? Make your guess right now. Are there more words like kitchen or more words like acknowledge?
If you're like most people, you confidently guessed that K appears more often as the first letter. And why? Well, as any Scrabble player will tell you, it is infinitely easier to search your memory for words that start with a letter than to recall words where that letter is randomly buried in the third position. But here is the truth. Letters like K, L, N, R, and V actually occur far more frequently in the third position. Because it's so much easier to recall the starting letter words, we wrongly assume they're more frequent. This is known as the availability heuristic. We judge the frequency of an event by how easily instances of it come to mind. And wow, this explains so much about our world. It's exactly why dramatic events or celebrity scandals completely dominate public perception and drive these massive media feeding frenzies, while critically important but kind of boring issues, like declining educational standards, get totally ignored. If it comes to mind easily, our brains just assume it's more important.
Part 4. Expert intuition versus illusion.
So if our gut feelings are so easily manipulated by stereotypes and memory tricks, does that mean all intuition is totally useless garbage? Well, no. To understand why, we have to look at the stark contrast between genuine expert intuition and deeply flawed illusions. Kahneman shares this incredible story of a fire commander who led his team into a burning kitchen. Suddenly, without knowing why, he screamed for everyone to get out. Mere seconds after they escaped, the floor completely collapsed. He later realized his ears had been unusually hot, and the fire was unusually quiet. His brain had subconsciously recognized the extreme danger of a massive fire in the basement right below them. Now contrast that with a financial executive who invested tens of millions of dollars into Ford Motor Company stock. When someone asked him why, the executive didn't bring up stock valuations or economic trends. Nope, he simply said he went to a car show, liked the cars, and decided to invest. He trusted his gut entirely, but it was a complete illusion of skill.
The absolutely crucial point here is understanding the difference between those two scenarios. The great psychologist Herbert Simon, who spent years studying chess masters, summed it up perfectly. He said, "Intuition is nothing more and nothing less than recognition." True expertise isn't magic, guys. It comes from thousands of hours of rigorous practice, allowing your brain to instantly recognize valid cues in a specific environment. When a 2-year-old points at a dog and yells "doggy," they are actually performing a miracle of expert intuition. They've learned the cues. That firefighter had thousands of hours of exposure to real fires. That financial executive at the car show, he definitely did not have thousands of hours of practice valuing stock based on how shiny a car's paint job was.
So what the heck was actually going on in that executive's brain? Well, when we face a tough question and we don't have that true practiced expertise, our brains don't just throw their hands up and quit. Instead, they use something called the affect heuristic. This is the process guided entirely by raw, visceral feelings of liking or disliking, and it happens with almost zero conscious reasoning. What the brain secretly does is substitute a highly complex question with an incredibly easy one. That executive faced the difficult question, is Ford stock currently underpriced? But his brain secretly swapped it out for the super easy question, do I like Ford cars? He answered the easy question, felt a massive surge of confidence, and dropped millions of dollars, completely unaware that the bait and switch had even happened.
Part 5. Thinking fast and slow. Kahneman wraps all of these internal tug-of-wars, the shortcuts, the biases, the actual expertise versus the total illusions, into a constant battle between two distinct characters living inside our heads, System 1 and System 2. System 1 is our fast thinker. It operates automatically with basically zero effort and no sense of voluntary control. It houses our heuristics, our basic perceptions, and, if we've earned it, our true expert intuition. It is incredibly influential. It is the secret author of most of the choices we make every day. System 2, on the flip side, is the slow thinker. It allocates our attention to effortful mental activities, like complex math problems or deliberate, careful reasoning. We identify with System 2. We really think it's the conscious, logical self running the show. But honestly, more often than not, System 2 is just lazily rubber stamping the intuitive suggestions fed to it by that lightning-fast System 1.
Now that you have this vocabulary, now that you understand heuristics, biases, and that constant push and pull between System 1 and System 2, you've actually got a sort of superpower. It gives you the ability to step back and analyze decisions way more objectively. So the very next time you find yourself, or maybe a colleague, jumping to a super confident conclusion at the water cooler, just ask yourself, was that a deliberate, reasoned choice, or did System 1 just secretly substitute an easy question for a hard one? I'll leave you to think about which system is truly running your show right now.